All right, let's get some insight on the Nebraska Cornhuskers in the first year under Matt Rhule. It's Mike Schaefer of Husker 24/7. Mike, let's start here. Matt Rhule's been there for almost 10 months now. What's the biggest impact he's made on the program, or what's the biggest thing you've noticed about Matt Rhule and his program through 10 months?
Yeah, it's interesting. He talks, sounds, and acts like a Big Ten coach. So we'll start with that one. The last two iterations have been Scott Frost and Mike Riley, and even Bo Pelini before, a former Big Ten player, but had spent most of his Nebraska head coaching career at one point in the Big 12. So it's weird. You have a coach who's talking about emphasizing special teams and field position and defense and winning in the trenches. These were never things Scott Frost talked about. I know that's stunning. I know it's hard for people to imagine a head coach would not have those thoughts, but yeah. So that in itself has been a little bit unique. So it kind of speaks to Nebraska, which sort of was on an island in terms of how they played, sort of pulling back towards what we now around here just refer to as vintage Big Ten West football, where the highlights largely seem to be the good punts that landed between the 3-yard line and the end zone line and everything else, and the offense is spectacularly bad. So yeah, I mean they're fully entrenched. This is the most Big Ten West version of Nebraska football that maybe we've ever seen in these parts. And it's great. It's the last year of it. Right. They're finally getting there right when it's all about to end.
Yeah, Matt Rhule's such a perfect fit for the Big Ten West. Too bad it's all going away here very shortly, or so we assume. We'll see what the new iteration of the schedule looks like here moving forward. How's the fan base after a 2-3 start, 0-2 to start the Big Ten? I looked at this as a rebuild. I don't know what locally it was like, Mike. I mean, there's obviously high expectations at Nebraska. It's a great fan base, but how's the fan base dealt with this first 5 games?
All the talk was basically, this is just, they're going to they're going to fight, scratch, and claw to get to 6-6 and maybe 7-5 if things break right for them. And they're 2-3 right now. They're the biggest month of their season coming up with Illinois, Northwestern, Purdue. All games that theoretically Nebraska could win. All games theoretically Nebraska could lose. So they have to get what they can out of the month of October. And coming off of this loss to Michigan, you would think that people thought Nebraska was going to be prepared to go toe-to-toe with the number 2 team in the country, and quite possibly maybe the deepest, best team in the country. And I mean, frankly, Nebraska got absolutely beat, like just completely, utterly beat down in every phase of that football game. And that shouldn't be that big of a surprise. They're nowhere near that level. And so it's, for the fan base, on one hand, you have the people that say the right things of, oh yeah, Matt Rhule's got to have time. He's got to get his system to work. It's going to take a little bit. Like, look at the injury situation. On the other hand, you just have years of frustration of tired of being this, kick dog, if you will. And it's really kind of boiled over to more anger than I was anticipating at the start of this year. Now you go back to how the season started, blowing a winnable game against Minnesota, where you basically have it in the bag and you give it away in the fourth quarter. Then, longtime rival, Colorado, you get that game, and Nebraska played well. Like nobody thinks that because of the score, but they played well, especially early in that game, kind of set up the blueprint for how teams were going to attack Colorado going forward. But they don't have enough offense. Like they couldn't score. They couldn't catch snaps against Colorado. So the anger is just so deep seated because of the way that this thing has already started. And it just feels like, okay, new coach, same crappy football. Like, when is this going to end? And some of it, it's hard for Nebraska fans to realize, like, that cycle is not easy to get out of. It takes time. Like, it takes the right individual to make the right hires and to bring in the right players. And even then, you still have to get a little bit lucky. And so I think the fan base, and I'm using Twitter, I'm using message boards, I'm using call-in shows as examples. So that's my own mistake right there. But I think for the most part, there's willingness to be patient, but people want to see more progress than what they've probably seen so far here in 2023.
So, Mike, before we dive into this iteration of the team, I think Matt Rhule needs time, and obviously he's got a history of turning around programs, and what he did at Baylor is one of the best rebuilds of college football history. what is the expectation for when Matt Rhule gets it going? Like, is it in a new Big Ten with Oregon, USC? Like, what do they expect in Lincoln once Matt Rhule is 4 years into this?
That's kind of the part of the conversation we never really get to, because they never get to the point where they're just sort of mediocre, right? Like the sort of alternatively hilarious, devastating thing about Nebraska football is that there's so much angst for what it's going to look like when they're at the mountaintop that nobody ever really realizes that they can't even get halfway up the mountain before falling off again. So, I mean, part of it to me is it doesn't, welcoming in USC and UCLA and Oregon and Washington and jettisoning the Big Ten West, which I think is good for the sport. Like, I think having two horribly unbalanced divisions is bad for the conference overall. That doesn't really matter that much, because where Nebraska is going to be ultimately, until they're not, is measuring themselves against teams like Illinois, Northwestern, Minnesota, to a degree, Wisconsin and Iowa. Like, those are your peers, even if it's not a division anymore. Those are the teams that you haven't been able to beat with any kind of consistency for going on 3-4 years now. And so I don't really care about the random one-off game against Oregon that you play in 2024, and then you may not see them again until 2028. Like, they're at a different point as a program. And so I think, with Nebraska, it's got to be, can they just get to the point where you can get to 6-6, and then we're talking 8-4, and then after that, what's next? And I think Matt Rhule can do that. I have real hesitation about what the ultimate upside of this program could be, but I will say this: he is clearly in the mindset of a college coach that went to the NFL and learned some things about how football works up there, and is trying to bring almost, I wouldn't say an NFL mentality to college football, but if you look at how Michigan does things, that is what Nebraska wants to model. They want a defense that can be consistent and can play against any type of offense if they need to. They want athletes on every level. Whether it's up front, they need to be quick. Whether it's in the middle of the field, they need to be quick. Whether it's on the back end, they need to be quick. Obviously, everybody wants all of these things, but the way that they're sort of doing it in the 3-3-5 defense allows them to play teams that spread the field. But also, Michigan aside, they didn't hold up very well against the run in that game. They shut down every other rushing attack that they faced. The best chance for Nebraska to win on Friday against Illinois, take that run game away, make Illinois beat you through the air. I don't know if Illinois can do that. I don't know if they can put up enough points that way. But so, that's kind of what they're trying to do. And then offensively, it's a pro-style offense. I mean, it's not right now. Right now, it's a kitchen sink. They're just trying to do anything they can to get 3 yards of play. But, it's going to be, when this thing is set up how they want it set up, it's going to be a pro-style offense. It's going to be a team that I think is built to try to win games in conference in the 20s, where you had Scott Frost, who wanted an offense that could get into the 40s, and they could never really do that, and it progressively got worse. I think they'd be comfortable playing games in the 20s. So I think the way that he's going to build it is through the defense, through the trenches, but they have to go get the pieces, and they have to get better, kind of in a hurry. They're not a very deep team, and they're not a very talented team. So it doesn't leave you with a lot of options on game day.
Yeah, but long-term, that is the way to build it in the Big Ten. So after Mike Riley, after Scott Frost, I think that's the good start.
It seems like that might've been a targeted part of the whole, head coaching hire. I know that's, again, people seem to think that these hires are just like picked out of a hat or at random or whatever. But I think for Trev Alberts as Nebraska's athletic director, going and modeling yourself off of what's been successful in the Midwest is not the worst way to do it right now.
I want to take a minute and tell you about Home Field. They are a premium collegiate apparel brand based in Indianapolis. They emphasize their commitment to creating incredibly comfortable, officially licensed apparel with vintage college designs. They feature a growing collection of over 150 plus colleges to choose from, including, of course, the University of Illinois. Home Field designs are super unique, guys, because they delve into the archives and history of each school, including Illinois, and they use unique logos and iconic moments to create thoughtfully designed apparel. So if you go to homefieldapparel.com, you can see the 80s Illini football helmet that so many like, Flying Illini logo, the Illinois basketball logo from the 2004-2005 Illini team. The script Illini is there. And you guys, these are the most comfortable shirts. And that's what I love about Home Field Apparel. You get the comfort, but you also get authenticity and nostalgia. So I'm telling you guys, give their site a look. It's not the typical Illinois gear you usually see. You can find them at homefieldapparel.com, where you can see their collection of colleges available. And guess what? Our listeners at Illini Inquirer get 15% off their first order with discount code Illini23. Again, 15% off your first order at homefieldapparel.com with discount code Illini23. So, as you go to Illinois football games, get ready for the Illinois basketball season, Home Field Apparel is the perfect apparel to get you ready for the upcoming season. So check them out at homefieldapparel.com. I'm very excited to announce a new partnership with Underdog Fantasy. We decided to partner with Underdog because it's the easiest place to play fantasy sports. It's also the fastest growing fantasy app in the industry. Underdog Fantasy has a lot to offer, including their Pick'em game. In Pick'em, you pick whether your favorite players will have a higher or lower stat total in this week's game for a chance to win big. It's so easy to play. Just pick 2 to 5 stats of your favorite players and choose whether they'll go higher or lower. You can more than 20 times your amount of money by going 5 for 5. They also have a Best Ball Mania. If you think you know football, you got to check this one out. This year's Best Ball Mania has $50 million in total prizes up for grabs, with the winner taking home $3 million. So sign up today with promo code Illini and get your first deposit doubled up to $100. Visit UnderdogFantasy.com or find them in the App Store. And don't forget to register with my promo code Illini to get your first deposit doubled up to $100. You must be 18 plus and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-522-4700 or visit ncpgambling.org. All right, Mike, let's dive into this team. You said that the offense has been bad. It's the worst scoring offense in the Big Ten. Now, they do run the football well, 209 yards per game, leads the Big Ten. They're one of the worst in passing offense, only ahead of Iowa in the Big Ten. So why? What do they do offensively? Because I turn it on and I see I formation. I see 22 personnel. This is kind of an old school throwback a little bit with Nebraska.
Yeah, a lot of that has to do. They don't have wide receivers. I mean, their best wide receiver, Billy Kemp, Virginia transfer. He's the kind of guy that you're hoping to get 6 catches, 65 yards. That's sort of a good game for him at this point. Like they don't have a lot of big play potential in the passing game. They don't have a guy that can take you deep. They lost Isaiah Garcia Castaneda earlier this year. Xavier Betts left the football team at the beginning of August, and that was just torch their wide receiver depth. They have a bunch of freshmen people are excited about, but all of these freshmen are largely track guys that need to learn how to play wide receiver. They're really fast, and being fast is really helpful, but you also have to be able to run routes and know the route tree and the concepts in order to get onto the field. And some of those guys just aren't ready yet. And none of them came in early. So they're all just a little bit behind. So they are built with their running game. Which would be even better if they hadn't lost 2 of their top 3 running backs at this point, too. And so without Gabe Ervin, you kind of lost what they would refer to as the hammer of their offense. And they really wanted to kind of just hammer away at teams. And then the third, fourth quarter, those, 3, 4, 5-yard runs could become 7, 8, 10-yard runs. So that's what they did when they were successful against lesser teams like Northern Illinois and Louisiana Tech. It worked to a degree against Minnesota. But I think, with the injury to Jeff Sims in the second game, you have a backup quarterback that hadn't played before, who's probably more known for his legs, but he can throw it. And he did look okay against Michigan at times. He was 10 of 12 for 140 yards at one point in that game, finished with 199 and like 52% completion percentage. So it obviously went the other way, but they just don't have weapons, Jeremy. Like they're very much, they're going to play ball control. They're going to try to win in the special teams arena. And their defense needs to come up with some stops or big plays, because on offense, what you see is what you get. And Heinrich Hoiberg has the ability to run for a lot of yards, but it's hard to have a consistent offense in 2024 if you can't throw the ball, if you don't have receivers that can stretch the field. And if everybody knows that your quarterback run game is your best weapon, you get a lot of 9 guys in the box. And you could do that against this team because those receivers just aren't winning one-on-ones.
So is Harburger now the starter? Like, if Jeff Sims is healthy, is he still the starter?
That's the big conversation. I set one off on Twitter on Saturday, basically saying I would just move forward with Harburg as your guy, because with Sims, I struggle if he's going to be healthy at any point where he's near 100% this year again. his mobility being impacted is huge because, again, if you don't have these wide receivers for him to throw to, the fact that he's a slightly more polished passer with 30 more career starts than Hoiberg doesn't really matter. I mean, one, they don't have people for him to get the ball to. Two, in his 2 games this year, he's atrocious. I mean, threw 3 interceptions to Minnesota, several that were just unforced. I mean, they were just floated out there. And then he had issues against Colorado with the snap and the timing and catching it. He's fumbled multiple times this year. So to me, Hoiberg, even though he's far less experienced, has all the physical tools. I think you just continue because you're a kitchen sink offense. Like I don't have any problem with a guy who might have flaws, but he's your best athlete, and that's what Hoiberg is. Just go let him play. I mean, we've seen versions of Nebraska have moderate success with this before in the Big Ten, where you get those Adrian Martinez type days. Now, those teams had more talent than what Nebraska is going to be bringing to Champaign. You're going to be surprised at how desolate it looks compared to what you have been used to seeing.
Because usually they would have playmakers. They just couldn't consistently.
They don't have them.
Well, yeah,
they just don't have them. It is wild to see this. Like, I have watched teams that have been bad on offense in Nebraska before, and I've watched teams that have just been bad. But I don't know that I've ever seen a team just devoid, other than their 2 quarterbacks, of someone that can just hit a home run on a play. Like, they just don't have it.
That said, Mike, I mean, Illinois' defense is not last year's defense, right?
I know that's what everyone keeps saying. That's why this game is movable object versus stoppable force. There's nothing good in this game in terms of the teams playing in it. So that's why it's, in a weird way, it's compelling, because we don't know what we're going to see.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get into what this game means for Nebraska, but like the defensive front, like Johnny Newton's been good. Keith Randolph has been pretty good, but as a unit, they just haven't been all good. So how good is the blocking for Nebraska to run this kind of 1992 offense?
Yeah. So part of why they run that, they don't have the ability to pass protect. I mean, they start 5 offensive linemen, but they are a net -2 in terms of tackles, regardless of who's out there. Turner Corcoran had a 0.0 pass protection grade twice, I think, already this season. Wow. Teddy Prohaska came in for him when Corcoran got hurt against Michigan and immediately allowed 3 pressures on 5 snaps. So they don't have a left tackle right now. So they've got to stay out of obvious passing situation. The good thing is they seem to be at least average to slightly above average blocking, running the ball. And so that's why they haven't, other than the 2 games against Louisiana Tech and Northern Illinois, they really haven't been in a situation against a Power 5 team where you're trying to just run and salt the game away. Minnesota, they had that opportunity and they had a fumble that kind of flipped things there. But if they are able to run early against Illinois, it plays right into what they want to do. They want to try to set up some passing because they don't want to be completely one-dimensional. But if Hoiberg and Anthony Grant, and those are your primary guys, if they're able to find space, if they're able to, and they run through contact, like they don't go down easily, either one of them, that could be very helpful for setting up the rest of Nebraska's offense. But Michigan, as soon as they were able to take the run away, then you're worried about a couple tight ends and a couple wide receivers, and you find different ways to sort of either cover that, or you just bring the pressure and Nebraska's offensive line can't stop it. So that it's imperative for Nebraska to get a lead early in this game, or at least hang around so they don't have to just constantly throw.
I found this stat just diving into the numbers. 3rd and long passes of 7+ yards. Nebraska has converted 6 of 26. So get them in 3rd and long. That is the key for Illinois. Defensively, this looks like a legit Big Ten West team, Mike. What has worked for them on defense, which has been obviously for Nebraska a sore spot for a long time?
Yeah. So the right up in front and center, Nash Hutmacher is their nose tackle, and he has destroyed 4 of the 5 opponents Nebraska has played this year. And when I say destroyed, I mean, this is like, it's not Sue, because we're never going to see that again. But this is a guy that has absolutely forced teams to triple team him in the middle. And, he's a big 6'5", 300-pound former heavyweight champion wrestler out of South Dakota. His nickname's a polar bear. Everything about him feels a little bit, outsized in terms of personality and all of that. But he wrecked Northern Illinois' offensive line by himself. He wrecked Colorado's offensive line to the tune that Nebraska was able to get 7 sacks because they had to commit so many guys to blocking him that other people were able to get free. He is the key to this defense. They're going to be without Luke Reimer. They're going to be without Deshaun Singleton. Those are two of their better players on the second and third level. But they have guys that they're the way to describe Nebraska's defense, they're exceedingly competent. They're not awash with playmakers. They're not going to force a ton of turnovers. Now, if Illinois can, they get into some spots where they're putting the ball up for grabs, maybe that'll help out. But Nebraska really, if you look at the numbers, they don't have a lot of pass deflections. They don't get their hands on a lot of passes. What they do is they get teams into third and long a lot, and they get off the field because they're not able to convert. They take advantage of the fact that teams haven't been able to run the football on them. And so, the first down is wasted. Second down, maybe you get 3 yards on a pass, and then all of a sudden it's 3rd and 7. And their gamble is that if they do that to you 3 times in a drive, they win one of those 3 times, you're punting. And that's how they play defense this year, and it's worked pretty well for them. Now, the pass rush has dipped pretty heavily from the first 3 games. It was on fire. The last 2 had not been getting home to the quarterback. That'll be a big thing to watch. If they struggle in the pass rush again, the secondary has been pretty susceptible. They play off coverage. They really have a bubble there. If you remember, I think it was Arthur Sikowski basically just threw 6-yard passes the entire day in 2021, and Nebraska never adjusted to that. Mm-hmm. This version of the defense will allow for that, just assuming that they'll get bored and try something else. But if Illinois is comfortable just taking what's right in front of them, they could stay on the field for a while. And teams have been able to do that. They just haven't converted it to a lot of points.
Yeah. All right, Mike, what does this game mean for Nebraska and their season and Matt Rhule's start?
Yeah, so I mentioned huge month. So Nebraska's next 4 games are Illinois, Northwestern, Purdue, Michigan State. Nebraska's 2-3. If they can win 3 of those 4 games, they finish with Maryland, Wisconsin, Iowa. That Iowa game, the records don't matter. It's like a total. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who's playing. You know what that game's going to look like on Black Friday. Either way, it just comes down to which team is more competent. Usually that's Iowa. Mm-hmm. So they have an opportunity. If a bowl game is what the whole season hangs on, and it's what people around here want. And Rhule has done a nice job of not like making that. It's not guaranteed anything like that, but he's basically, he's talked about wanting to build this program the right way and feeling like they're not in the same situations that he's inherited at Temple and Baylor, where they went 1-11 and 2-10. So this is a month for Nebraska to show progress, and I think it really starts with this game. It's a sneaky big game on the schedule when it came out, coming off of the Michigan game on a short week, going on the road to a place where Nebraska traditionally has not played particularly well. So it's an important game, and they're treating it as such. This is not like we just got to get through this one and then we get the bye week. No, this is, I wouldn't call it their Super Bowl by any means, but the commentary coming out of the players and the coaches this week, they recognize what's in front of them. They recognize what the month of October can be for them if they want to get to a bowl game in 2023.
So what are the keys to going on the road? And I guess we're calling this an upset, even though Illinois is played incredibly poorly. What are the keys to beating an Illinois team that is down right now, Mike?
Imagine being an odds maker looking at this game and just like not throwing your hands up in the air, Like, what are you supposed to do?
Hey, Illinois is at home, give them 3.
Yeah, basically that's kind of what it came down to. So I think the key, like I said, they got to be able to run the ball. They have to stay on the field in that regard, set up easy throws for Heinrich Harburg in that fashion. If you can make Illinois, again, one-dimensional, put a lot of pressure on them to be able to beat you with their arm. The other key here, and I always forget, is it Altmaier? Is that? Yeah. He is a central cog in all of this, not just because he's a quarterback, but just from scouting the box score and a little bit that I've watched, he can run a little bit too. And that is not something that teams have taken advantage on 3rd down. They've gotten scrambles to keep drives alive, but we haven't seen a team just come out and run with their quarterback. And that might be something with Nebraska without Luke Reimer, without Deshaun Singleton, 2 guys that have been coming up into the box and providing great, run tackling, run support for you. That might be an area where Illinois can really stress Nebraska. And so they have to take away the traditional run and then see if they can survive, if Illinois has a lot of quarterback run game.
Mike, I know you focus mostly on football, but I got to ask you, Fred Hoiberg, are people in on him again out in Lincoln? Or
the way that things finished last year, I know that you've been a fan for a while, but the rest of the conference learned about Keisei Tominaga. Yeah. He is by far the most fun player we've seen at Nebraska. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's the best, but they've got an interesting team set up. The problem is a lot of their key pieces weren't able to practice together much of this summer because they were playing in those FIBA events. You know, a guy that people in Illinois are probably familiar with, Rink Mast from Bradley, transferred over. I know from talking to Hoiberg this summer, he's really excited because his best versions of his offense have a 5 that can shoot threes, and that's what Rink Mast can bring to the table. And as good as Derek Walker was for Nebraska, they felt like there was times where they couldn't really run the full offense that they wanted to because he can't shoot from the outside. Now, what he could do as a point forward allowed him to do some other things. But they're excited about Rink Mass, and you know, they're excited about Tominaga. This is, I think, the most players they brought back in any one season to another under Fred Hoiberg, which is both damning and also, I guess, good.
Yeah.
But it feels like an NIT team is kind of its upside. I think people around here would certainly want it to be better than that, but that would be progress. And given that they've announced a $450 million stadium renovation, they just replaced their football coach for the 3rd time since 2014. I don't know that Fred Hoiberg is really on a hot seat here unless Nebraska truly screws up. And his son's on the team. It feels like this is going to go for at least a few more years. And he earned some grace in that February through Tominaga that earned, you know, if they could be an NIT team this year, people I think will be okay with that. It feels better now than it certainly did in year 3, where it's like, how is this so bad?
There's no one I enjoy watching more on a Tuesday night at 5:30 p.m. than K-State Tominaga. It's just
that's his time. That's his time to shine.
So much joy. So much joy. All right, Mike Schaefer, Husker 24/7. Check out his great work and the team's great work at Husker 24/7. Mike, thanks, man. I guess I'll see you Friday for a big game.
Yeah. I actually am not going to be there on Friday. I'm not making the trip over, but you can hang out with BC and Brunts and all of that. Hopefully the Nebraska media has treated you well and your many requests that I'm sure you
tell you. It is Wednesday, at 12:30, and I have not gotten a request from 20 radio shows yet in Nebraska. This is rare. Usually I'm doing like 7 radio shows per week.
Very disappointing.
Yeah. Mike, thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Jeremy.